Disclaimer. Any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome back to the podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. And today I welcome Austin West on the show. And I'm excited to dive into our conversation about microdosing and the benefits of that and Austin's stories around that. So welcome to the show today, Austin. Glad to have you on.
Good to be here, man.
Awesome. So a quick introduction to Austin. So Austin is a certified psychedelic medicine practitioner, entrepreneur, and founder of Entheos Holistics, a sanctuary guiding people into the reconnection of their mind, body, and soul through the spiritual practice of microdosing. So Austin, be really great to hear, what is microdosing? How would you define it for anyone who's new to it, hasn't heard of it, or maybe heard of it but don't know what it is? And how did you get into it?
Yeah, I kind of want to call out how most people have probably heard of it real quick, which is the very scientific basis of it, right? Most people hear microdosing and they hear jargon like neuroplasticity and neurogenesis and brain-derived neurotropic factor and cellular longevity and glutamate and GABA, all these big scientific terms, right, that are explaining what the practice of microdosing is doing to our body. The more I dive into these realms, the more I understand a lot of times science is just trying to explain the spiritual, right? And so I like to frame the practice of microdosing in a much different way. I believe that microdosing is a spiritual practice of reconnecting to the mind, the body, and the soul. That triad, the mind, body, soul, has been talked about for thousands of years, right? From Christianity to Buddhism, from the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Greeks to the Romans. You cannot find a culture on earth that has some sort of spiritual or religious doctrine that doesn't weave in the teachings of the mind, body, soul. And so this is how I look at the practice of microdosing. It is a practice that reconnects us to the mind, body, soul aspects of the self, because those three aspects of self are what essentially make up our own individual realities. Now, when I say mind, I'm talking about our thoughts, our patterns, our choices, our behaviors, our distortions, the way we talk to ourselves, right? Everything of the mental cognition, the logos. When I say body, I'm talking about our somatic experience. So many people are living out here, out of the body, and have really lost that connection of what it means to feel at home in our bodies. We can see that in the physical nature of where a lot of humanity is, right? And so the body is the somatic experience. It's the emotional experience of our body as well, because the body is what is trapping and keeping our emotions harbored. And the soul, I simplify it, man. I just think that the soul is the now. It's the ever-present moment. It's the only thing that exists. And it really encompasses everything that comes with what it means to be wholly present. And so the practice of microdosing, in my opinion, is to reconnect to these parts of ourselves. And through that reconnection, we get to build a heightened sense of awareness of what our experience of life is already doing, how it's already happening, how it's already unfolding, and not living in the frameworks of the past or the future, where all of our anxiety and our depression and our rumination, most of the stuff that we suffer from lives. And so to get practical about it, what microdosing is taking a micro dose, so a very small, a 1/10th, 1/20th, 1/30th of a deep journey dose of an entheogenic substance. In this case, we're talking about psilocybin. It is meant to be a functional practice, meaning you live your life completely as normal. You don't need to make any changes to your life. You can work, you can drive, you can parent, you can play, whatever your day-to-day life looks like. Microdosing is meant to be able to plug into that to enhance your awareness of your experience of life, so we can start to notice the things that so often pass us by that end up leading to our suffering, right? If it's not functional, if you're not able to live life as normal, it is not a microdose. That is our opinion. You're no longer in that range of it being considered a microdose. And so this is about using the power and potency of an altered state of consciousness for our evolution and growth. And just kind of frame one more analogy in a bit. For anybody that's done a high dose journey, any psychedelic journey, ayahuasca, mushrooms, DMT, peyote, I don't care what it is. When you go all the way into those experiences, your consciousness is taking a complete 180. Like you are not there. I believe you've done ayahuasca, right? And so it's like you're very much in an altered state. You're out of body experience. If that is a 180 degree shift in consciousness, I like to look at microdosing as a 5 degree. shift in consciousness, right? It is a slightly altered state of consciousness change to where I'm still living my same life, but I'm looking at it through a slightly different lens. And from that new lens is when I gain awareness to all of these things that I had typically lost disconnection from.
Got you, like beautiful explanation. Like, yeah, I like the 5 degrees as opposed to the 180 degree. Yeah, and just like life can go so quickly, right? The benefit, I guess, of this, does it sort of help you slow down?
I think presence is what helps us slow down. So absolutely. You know, I'll just talk about the two things that most people are suffering from, at least here in the United States, right? But I'm sure internationally it's got its weight as well. Depression and anxiety. And those two things encompass so much. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't have an anxiety, but they're stuck in ruminating thought patterns, overthinking, paralyzation by analyzation. All of that is anxiety-based thoughts as well. Fear is an anxiety-based thought. Or depression. It's the inability to accept what is. We're living in the past. So those two things that so many people suffer from are keeping us out of the present moment. We are, especially with the mind, which is a prediction machine. So it's constantly trying to predict the future, the brain rather, based on past events and circumstances. And so if we don't reconcile the parts of us that are stuck in the past, come to a deep place of healing and acceptance over what happens, then we are worried that what happened in our past is going to repeat in the future. If we're living in those past and future-based mindsets, life feels like it's rapidly speeding up. And my belief is that is the expression of stress, is that we are stumbling through life. We're living reactively towards life. And it's almost like I get this visual of when I think of anxiety and the energy of anxiety and stress, it's like I'm almost leaning forward and life is kind of pulling me into it rather than being able to sit back, feel like I'm in my back body and I can be responsive to life. And so I would absolutely say that microdosing enhances that level of presence and awareness and just brings us back to the moment, and everything can slow down from that place, right? We reconnect to our breath, we reconnect to our body, we reconnect to our emotions, we reconnect to the truth of our thoughts and realize that these stories that I'm telling myself, it's like, why am I fearing a future that hasn't even come yet? It's like right now in this moment, I have everything I need. And it helps us kind of assimilate back into the present, which is where everything can slow down and we can relate to it in a much more response-able way.
So yeah, I like what you said about like it's kind of not getting absorbed into it, it's being able to step back and respond rather than being kind of like dragged into that. I'm curious, Austin, like, because a lot of people, you talked about depression, talked about anxiety and very common things I hear, and being through those myself, experienced them in my life. Lots of people, you know, turn to the bottle, like a drink and things like that, or other recreational kind of uses, which, you know, obviously not what we're talking about here. What's kind of the difference between sort of like alcohol and this? Because obviously alcohol can really be damaging, but people use it to unwind it in a way. Because I know you've had like a different kind of like life and perspective from those two things.
Yeah, I mean, I was a heavy drinker for 2 decades of my life. Started drinking at 14 years old. I was voted life of the party in high school. Like everybody knew me as the guy who'd stay up drinking the longest and partying the latest, you know? And that didn't stop until my early 30s. I mean, my entire life was revolved around the party culture, table life, drinking 3 to 4 days a week to blackout status. So I know the energy of alcohol and what that brings very, very intimate. You know, I think Andrew Huberman has said everything we need to say about alcohol. There is a zero tolerance of the amount of alcohol that doesn't end up being a poison inside the body. We know very well that alcohol is not good for us. And I kind of like to frame it this way, like when we're talking about the comparison thing, I kind of frame drugs and medicines. I would put alcohol in the category of drugs. Drugs limit or contract my experience of life. Medicines open or expand my experience of life. Alcohol is a depressant. Right. And so people that a lot of times when they're drinking to, quote, take the edge off, they're actually just perpetuating the same depressive state, which is the entire reason they need to take the edge off in the first place. Right. It's a numbing mechanism. Alcohol is absolutely a numbing mechanism that has been thrust on society as a social norm, when really it's because society has been set up in a way that doesn't lead to more fruitful lives, just in the very nature of what it means to live in these societies. Compared to microdosing, it's about connectivity. And a lot of people, at least I was in San Diego, and so it was a lot more freely used there, relative to some other places, right? But there's a lot of people I know that started using the practice of microdosing to replace alcohol because it actually opened them up. It reduced their social anxiety. It made them feel more connected to the people around them. It made them feel more vulnerable and like they could be themselves. Most people who drink consistently don't have that same relationship with it. They feel like it makes them less of themselves. They feel like they can't even be themselves or be in social environments unless they have a few drinks. And at the end of the day, it's like none of it's good or bad, right? I used to probably drink 20, 30 drinks a weekend. Now might have 6, 10 drinks a year, right? And it's not like I eliminated that from my life. I still believe there's times to use it in celebration or if I'm on vacation. And I'm very conscious of what this is. Every time I have that drink, I know that it's damaging to my body, to my mind, and to my soul. I know that it's disrupting my gut. It's disrupting my emotional pathways, everything that comes with it. So as long as you're making the choice consciously, go for it. And if you feel like you're not living a life that's in complete alignment, that might be one of the things to start looking at.
I've got you. How did you, so you kind of, you went from the transition from alcohol to this way. Was that kind of like a certain point that kind of made you like start stopping it in your life?
Yeah, dude. It was like I wasn't even necessarily looking for the change. I mean, I was in the middle of my partying when I kind of had this, I call it my awakening moment, right? We all have it. For some people, it's psychedelics. For some people, it's death. For some people, it's something dramatic. You know, they're forced out of their job. They thought they're going to work out forever. These moments in our life that shift everything for us. The reason I've dedicated my life to microdosing is because microdosing was the thing that led to that moment for me. At the time I found it, I was drinking three days a week pretty heavily. I was doing coke every weekend. If not, a good month would be only 3 weekends a month. You know, would I be doing blow on the weekends? I was on a myriad of pharmaceuticals. I think I was on 4 different pharmaceuticals at the time. And I went to the beach with some friends one day. And one of my buddies, who's actually my roommate at the time, he offered me a mushroom chocolate. And I remember like fighting him. I'm like, dude, I've heard these things make you lose your mind. I don't want to take it. And he's like, bro, I've seen you snort shit out of a stranger's bag before. It's like, okay, fair enough. You're right. And so I took this mushroom chocolate. 90 minutes later, it's like my life changed, man. And one of the things I always think back to that moment and remember is it's like I knew I didn't like the life I was. I knew I didn't like going out and partying. I knew I didn't like doing blow. I knew I didn't like sleeping around. I knew that every time I took these pharmaceuticals, they didn't feel good. It didn't feel like it was expanding or healing myself, but I couldn't grab it. It's like I could see beyond this thin veneer that, fuck, man, I don't like the life I'm living. But something about the state I was in didn't let me fully acknowledge or own that within myself to make any changes. This day at the beach, when I took that microdose, it like cleared the distortion of all the lies I was telling myself. And I was able to meet myself in the truth of the moment and fully own like, oh shit, I don't like any of the way that I'm living my life. I don't like my job. I don't like the environments I'm in. I don't like these behaviors I'm engaging in. I don't like the choices I make. You know, and it took a few years to unravel that. Obviously, a career and friends that I had been really deeply ingrained with for a decade. Like, it's not like I changed overnight, but that day, that moment was the beginning of unraveling and bringing my life back into alignment because I couldn't unsee what I now saw. I now saw that I was engaging in all of these abusive behaviors to myself, and I just had no desire to engage in that anymore. And again, it's a process. It's like anybody who's gone through an awakening moment knows, like it's a thing to confront these parts of yourself that you know are your own limitations in the way that you've kept yourself small. But that transition, that microdose ended up being that breaking point to where I was finally ready to leave that world behind and embark on this new journey of exploring these plant medicines and these psychedelics and what they could bring to my life.
Wow, a big turning point of that. So it's like for sort of like the process or using it practically, is it something that you do like every day now?
No, microdosing in general, it's not meant to be done every day.
Okay.
So you follow what's called a protocol. Now, there's a lot of protocols out there. You know, some of the more infamous, what some people might call the goats of microdosing, Paul Stamets, James Fadiman. You know, they've been talking about this practice for decades now. They have their own set protocols. In my opinion, a lot of protocols are anecdotal. Now, it's important to follow one because this isn't about creating dependency. It's not a pill for pill solution, right? We're not creating dependency on this practice. We're learning from this practice. And so when I reconnect to my mind, body, soul in the present moment, what am I learning about myself? What am I learning about how I talk to myself? What am I learning about the choices I make? What am I learning about how I feel in certain environments? So it's not about taking it every day to create a dependency. It's about noticing what kind of shifts do I notice on the days I'm microdose, and how can I take those shifts and incorporate them into my normal day-to-day life. So something I like to do is, and this is what I'm doing with a microdose cohort I'm running right now, I like an every other day protocol for something like 4 to 6 weeks, and then I'll take a few weeks off, right? And so I'm noticing every other day, I'm noticing these shifts in my emotional states and my thoughts and my processes and the choices I'm making. And then because I'm doing it back to back days, I'm able to integrate those teachings and lessons from the previous day the next day. And I'm actively growing and evolving. And it's like, and you'll know this from doing ayahuasca, it's like when you go through that big experience, I mean, bro, 6 months, a year to integrate that, it's like, it can be some heavy paradigm shattering stuff to really integrate into your life. Because this practice is so subtle, you get to integrate in real time, right? And I had this guy tell me once, he's a fireman, he has 3 kids and a couple months into microdose. He's like, dude, for the first time since I've been married and had kids, I think I haven't yelled at my family for a week straight. He's like, I didn't realize how much anger I was in. He was living so reactively in his triggers. He didn't realize that he was dumping his triggers and his own trauma on his wife and kids. And the practice of microdosing kind of helped them slow down. And because we're in that more present state, when our triggers come up, it's kind of like, I'm going to use an analogy given to me by somebody else, Ali Shaper. Shout out to Ali. She says microdosing is kind of like the scene in The Matrix. And if you imagine when those bullets are coming at Neo, all those bullets are our triggers. There are defensiveness, there are projections, there are wounding that we're constantly dumping on other people. And there comes a point when you start to build a relationship with this practice of microdosing where it's like you literally feel like you get to put your hand up and stop those bullets that are representative of your triggers, and you have more choice in the moment. And so it's like you get to engage and start to realize like, oh, I actually don't need to react that way right now. Okay, I don't need to get angry to the guy that just cut me off. I don't need to get defensive to my spouse just expressing something that's on their heart right now. And it's like the compound effects of those micro decisions, those intentional decisions that we get to make in life, puts us more in a response able, right? We're more responsive to life, responsibility, we're response able towards the difficulties that are happening in life rather than being react to how life is happening towards us. So that's one of the best ways I like to kind of paint the picture of what it feels like when we're engaging with this practice. And so even on your off days, you'll start to notice you have that same responsiveness rather than reactiveness. It gets to a point where once people do a free protocols, they understand how the practice works for them. And so some people will then take it every day for a week and then not touch it for a month, right? You end up building this relationship where you feel called when to go back to the microdosing practice and when you actually don't need it and can take a break. And that's kind of the relationship I have it with myself these days. But it doesn't matter how you do it. No one takes it every day because that's not the purpose of it.
I was watching The Matrix last night. Matrix Reloaded, second one. Yeah, so I know what you mean with the bullets and the kind of like the slow motion, but talking about the analogy was really good in terms of like events coming at you and you're able to like look at them like in a different way. I love that, how powerful that is. Yeah, and also it makes sense like someone who's not done it, like for that integration period, because when you do go for a big experience, it's like, right, now I've got to do this integration, which I've learned, I've done, not as effectively the first time as I could have done it. But it's just those little integrations between days sounds really beneficial as well in the journey. So with a lot of people like struggle with their relationship with themselves, like self-love, self-esteem and liking themselves. Do you feel like microdosing can benefit people with that at all?
I do. And the reason being is you got to meet the part of yourself and the truth of what it is. So often that inner critic, and this is something I struggled with for most of my life, that inner critic can get so loud that we end up drowning under its voice. And because we're drowning under its voice, we end up kind of numbing to it, and we know it's there, and we're just kind of cowering in the corner, letting this thing pound on us all day long. But that voice isn't yours. That voice was actually given to you by your teacher, your parents, your friends, your religion, whatever programs were given to you in early childhood development as you're growing up are those inner voice and critics that are running in the background. There's this Pope from the 40s that has one of my favorite quotes. He says, "Show me the first 7 years and I'll show you the man." Right? Most of what we're living in our life was programmed into us in the first 7 years. And Bruce Lipton talks about this in his work a lot too, that in the first 7 years of our life, we're basically in hypnosis. We're just absorbing everything in our environment. The second 7 years, we're testing what we've absorbed in our environment. Right? This is where you see the bully syndrome in a lot of kids, and it typically happens in that 7 to 14 range because they were bullied in their first 7 years. And so it's like, okay, this is my program. And then they go and test that program out in the world, right? And then after that, coming into late teens, we're pretty much subset until you start doing a lot of this work. And so the inner critic is part of what I call the ruminating mind. And it's the mental chatter that just goes on and on and on. And it can feel so debilitating, rather, that a lot of people, they just do what they can to distract, numb, or suppress that voice. Instead of looking directly at it, having a conversation with it, realizing that it is a part of you, it is not you, and being able to quiet that ruminating mind through the practice of microdosing, we get to relate to it differently. We get to feel what the ruminating mind is wanting us to feel in the first place. We get to be more present with it and get out of the, again, rumination is never happening in the present. If people are stuck in the thought loops and the inner critic and the stress and the anxiety and the depression, you are not in the present. You are living in past or future-based thoughts. And so when we microdose, when we come back into the present, we get to relate to these parts of ourselves differently. It's not a fix though. Right? It's like, now that we're relating to that part differently, you got to do the work. This is where journaling is one of the best practices on the planet. If you can learn to journal and tell yourself the truth through journaling, this is how you get to meet those parts. Why are they saying what they're saying? Who's the one that taught me to say this to myself? What is this part of me trying to teach me? How can I become free of this thing? Going through those practices when we're in that more integrated state of being is how we eventually become free of them.
I like what you said about journaling as well, being a very effective one. And I guess like the practice of microdosing can help you with your journaling even more.
Yeah, this isn't even just microdosing. I think this of all psychedelics. So I believe that psychedelics in general are arbiters of truth. They are a bridge to truth because they clear the field of distortion, which is our cultural and societal programming, so we can meet ourselves in the truth of our experience. This is why people have big emotional processes, is because they do so much to guard themselves and armor against their emotional experience, and then they have a psychedelic experience, and then they cry or they shake or they purge, right? Because we're meeting the truth of what we're holding on to. This is why so many people get creative ideas when they microdose or take psychedelics, right? The guy who developed the PCR test, LSD, the guy who found the double helix DNA, LSD, Steve Jobs, iPhone, LSD. There's a lot of people who have had these profound creative downloads come through on psychedelics, right? Because it puts us in a creative mind, because it clears the field of distortion, which is what keeps us out of our joy, out of our creativity, out of our abundance, all of these things that are innate to the human experience. So when we engage in any sort of psychedelic, we're meeting ourselves in the truth of our experience. And so that's why when let's call it the truth frequency for a second, when we're in that deeper resonance of our truth frequency, and then we go to journal, we're able to acknowledge and admit and meet ourselves in the truth of the thing that we've been running from for a long time, right? And the thing that we don't acknowledge to ourselves, this is what Carl Jung called the shadow. If we don't acknowledge the truth of something that we're harboring, we push it in the shadow. Anything that we push in the shadow is going to then manifest in a shadowy way. And I can give a lot of examples. I'm sure if anybody even hearing that right now can think of their own. We can, I'm not going to go down that path. But anything that we're not willing to look at then manifests in our reality in the expression of it being a shadow, right? This is what I believe is the root cause of disease and cancer and autoimmune disorders. These are emotional expressions of the thing that we're not willing to look at, feel, and heal. And so whenever we do psychedelics, especially microdosing, when we meet ourselves in the truth, and then you take that into a journaling practice, you're literally getting to know yourself on a new level. And that is what the process of healing is. It's just getting to know ourselves on a profoundly new level.
Truth will set you free is a very common phrase, but now I kind of learned a new meaning behind it after going through those experiences.
There's a reason that that's one of the most prominent quotes of the Bible. right? You know, one of Buddha's most prominent quotes is there's only three constants in life: the sun, the moon, and truth, right? Like there's all of these different quotes about the power and potency of truth. And so when we engage with psychedelics, and truth is almost brought to us in sometimes of a confronting way that we can no longer deny or ignore, like the day at the beach. It's like I knew all of those things about my life, but when I took that microdose, I couldn't run from it anymore. It's like I couldn't unsee that. And so there's a real power, even if you don't ever want to do psychedelics. I promise you, one of my favorite journaling practices that I instruct everybody I work with to do, I call it the 10 truths journaling practice. Start your journaling practice every day with the truth is, and then write whatever comes up. The truth is I'm living in a lot of fear today. The truth is that I'm not very proud of myself for how I showed up last night. The truth is I'm binge eating my emotions away in food. The truth is that I'm not happy with my life. The truth is I'm not happy in my relationship. The truth is I don't like my friends very much. I don't give a shit what the truth is. Just get used to telling yourself the truth, because that is the thing that clears the field of the distortions that we're living in that are preventing us from having everything we want in life.
So, yeah, so profound when you have to be open and courageous and tell someone else the truth as well. I found, like, you don't want to out of a mask sometimes, but it's so powerful. I love those questions, the truth, writing that in there. And sometimes I don't know about you, but looking at triggers sometimes and just going honest on what is this actually about can be really beneficial.
Yeah, I really enjoy Peter Crone's perspective of triggers. I think Peter Crone's like one of the greatest teachers on the planet, right? The guy's a fucking master for sure. And his whole definition of triggers is trigger is the world reflecting the parts of you that are not free. It's like the simplest and easiest, profound definition of triggers that are. Your trigger has nothing to do with the person or thing that triggered you. All that person or thing is a mirror reflecting the part of you that you are still giving your power away to, right? Because if this is kind of plays into victim consciousness as well, right? If anything or anyone outside of me has control over my emotional experience or reaction, that thing has a piece of my power. And the more something has my power, the less I'm creating the life that I want to actually create, because I'm creating it based on my external circumstances. And so I think triggers, if we change our relationship to what a trigger is the most loud, clear signal of exactly the thing that needs to be looked at. And so now I've had this relationship in my life now where every time I get triggered, I'm like, okay, I can take a minute, pause, and be like, thank you, because now I'm aware that I'm still giving my power away to this thing. And then you just reverse it back. Okay, what is it that they said? How has this come up? Where could this have started in my life? What do I actually need in this situation not to feel triggered? Where do I don't think that person sees me, where it's really just an opportunity to see myself and give myself what I need? And so triggers have become a gift in my life because they're consistently, it's like, oh, another loud signal. That's exactly where I need to look. And so it's like, I don't even need to figure out what's next. I just need to notice my reaction to anything in life, and that's showing me where I need to look next.
Another thing that comes to mind, Peter Crone's, need to look more into him. He does come up with some brilliant stuff when I see him, and kind of looking at where you're not free. And it also makes me think of something Danny said, which is everything on the outside is a reflection of what's going on inside, and I've had to get truthful with that. And actually some of my results are reflected that, like financially, relationship wise, and things like that. So that could also be a sign I found for myself personally of what shows up.
Everything's a mirror, man. You know, one of my favorite, I'm a big fan of more esoteric and mythic teachings that have been around for thousands of years, because there's something about if it can survive that long, there's got to be a kernel of truth to it, you know? And one of my favorite teaching lineages is Hermeticism, Hermetic philosophy. And for anybody interested, I would dive into Robert Edward Grant. He's a really beautiful teacher on all things Hermetics. And the potency of Hermetics is this principle of correspondence. Everybody's heard this: as above, so below, as within, so without. And it is the whole principle that everything is a mirror, both fractally and infinitely. And so it's like, you are just a mere reflection of me based on my own perception of what I see in you is just the depth in which I've seen myself. And if we apply that to everything in life, it gets a little trippy to really look at that, right? I can only ever see in someone else what I know about myself. And this is where it's like bringing in Ram Dass right now. It's like Ram Dass said, if you want to heal the world, just heal yourself first. It all starts with us, because I can never see a healed world unless I have met that part of myself, right? And we wonder why we see so much war in the world. It's because we have so many people at war with themselves. Everything is just a reflection of what we're harboring individually and collectively. And so it's like, I believe that I'm creating my own reality based on my perspective, perception, belief systems, values, all of the above. And I believe the collective reality we live in is what our collective consciousness creates. And so that's why we can create whatever world we want to live in, but it all starts with individually coming back home to the self, looking at, what am I judging outside of me? Because that's the thing I'm judging within. Because I wouldn't judge it outside of there if I didn't judge the part inside here. Because the second I find compassion within me, I also have compassion for the part I used to judge outside of me. So everything is just a reflection of our own internal state.
Judgment's a big one. We're humans, you have to catch yourself out, but something I've been actively working on, and I know it's a common thing to get caught in that. But yeah, I love what you said about things are a reflection, and you've got the collective, and the consciousness is created from the collective consciousness of how we're seeing it. So empowering. It can be difficult, but so empowering at the same time, realizing how we're perceiving it and seeing our world and what's going on inside of us to look deeper, I found. But yeah, Austin, I know you currently you've got your cohort, you're taking them through like their journey, and I know you're like supporting people in the world with your products and your services. Where can people find you if they want to reach out and find out a little bit more about your work? And do you maybe have a final point you want to leave us with today?
Yeah, best way to reach me, my Instagram or website, I am Austin West. So pretty easy handles there to find me. And yeah, something that's coming through is the main point is every single one of us have the answers that we need. None of us need anything outside of ourselves. This is true of microdosing. This is true of psychedelics. This is true of coaching. This is true of all the gurus that we have hired. We don't need any of that, because it's everything we need to live the most joyful, abundant, and gratitude-filled life we have is already within us. We just got to get used to clearing the way to listen to those whispers and trust that we're being guided to exactly where we need to be. And there's some really beautiful tools to help us on that path. And so it's a realization that anything that you envision for yourself is possible for you. You just got to keep trusting, keep listening to the whispers, and keep showing up.
I love that. Thank you, Austin. That's a great final night. And thank you for everything you've shared and your wisdom today. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
Awesome. So that concludes today's episode. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.